Hi, we are the group for the Friday Metaphysical Discussion. I'm Dr. Rosemary Hyde, the facilitator. And Lisa, Karen, Abu, you wanted to say hi.
Hi, Lisa Hirsch here.
Karen Rowe.
Hi, Abu Diallo.
Okay, thank you. So today we just talked about it. We decided that the way that Mr. Ferrucci presents empathy in this chapter is beautiful. It's aesthetically beautiful. And for that reason, it's worth reading aloud and sharing at least a few of the parts of the chapter. The first one I'd like to start with is pages 132 down to almost the bottom of 133 about the violin. Who would like to read that aloud?
I will.
Okay, go ahead, Karen.
Although I am not a musician, I once had the opportunity to hold in my hands an exquisitely made violin dating to the 18th century. What amazed me, even more than its harmonious lines or the beautiful grain of its wood, was that holding it, I could feel it vibrate. It was not an inert object. It resonated with the various sounds that happened to resonate around it. Another violin, a tram passing in the street, a human voice. If you hold an ordinary factory-made violin, that just does not happen. There can be hundreds of sounds around it and the violin remains numb.
Okay, let's stop there for a minute. There were a couple of words that I suspect might be worth discussing from a standpoint of learning English. One is that the ordinary violin remains numb. Abu, are you familiar with that word?
No, I need an explication.
It means that it doesn't respond to anything. It doesn't feel anything. And the other word that means the same thing that was used a few lines before is inert. I'll put it in the so those two words basically mean the same thing. They don't, there's no response, there's no feeling. Inert and numb. So what was remarkable about that violin, that very beautiful, expensive violin, was that when he held it, it vibrated with every sound around it. Can you imagine that? Wow. There's this wooden object. And it's not inert. It's not numb. It's not just an object. It is alive and perceiving and vibrating with all the sounds that the person could hear. That must have been an interesting experience. A little bit further down, he says, this marvelous responsiveness is an active virtue. That's a good word to know too, a virtue. You probably do know it because there is a French word very similar, right? Except in French, it doesn't have an E. So.
Vertu ou vertu?
Vertu, oui. Yep. So this responsiveness is a virtue because it allows the violin to enter into resonance. A nice word, and I think it's also in French, right?
Oui.
That's a good English word too. And it goes hand in hand with the violin's capacity to create sound of extraordinary quality, music with a soul, able to inspire. In other words, the alive quality of the musical instrument impacts the beauty of the music it can create. We humans can be like that violin. Okay, Lisa, do you want to carry on from there? We humans.
All
Page
right. We humans
104.
are, or at least you undone. All right. Or we humans are, or at least can be like that violin. Since birth, we have been able to resonate with other human beings. A newborn cries when in the presence of other crying babies. Bit by bit, empathy, which at first is only a simple instinctual capacity to resonate, develops and becomes the capacity to understand other people's feelings and points of view, to identify with them. But if this capacity does not develop sufficiently, or if it is thwarted, we are in trouble. If we are insensitive to the emotions of others, each relationship becomes an impossible charade. And if we see others not as living subjects, but as things on par with a refrigerator or a street lamp, we allow ourselves to manipulate and even to violate them. When instead empathy is fully developed, our existence is immeasurably richer and more varied. We are able to step out of ourselves and enter into the lives of others. Relationships then become a source of interest, of emotional and spiritual nourishment.
Yes. And that last sentence, it's something that I'm finding myself experiencing more and more. I was not very empathetic as a young person. I think I was, and it kind of got scared out of me. So I learned not to be. Then I had to learn all over again how to discover, how to be open to feeling
without
with,
spilling it. And he was
which
glad
is
that
what
he had
empathy
trusted
means,
Emilio,
feeling with.
because Emilio
people.
felt
And
very
at the beginning
proud
of the chapter,
and happy that he was
Ferrucci
able to
gives a
actually be
subtitle
helpful
to this chapter. He calls it
succeed.
empathy, an expansion of
And
consciousness.
all of us,
And that has
people
certainly been
trust
true
us.
in my case,
Well, they don't.
in my experience.
But when they do,
That
we want to
As I have become
meet their expectations. We
aware,
want to make
become
them happy.
more capable
Whatever
of what the
your
violin
work
was capable of
been.
Of
There's a lot of
tuning in,
trust in that.
of paying attention, of
When people
feeling
hire us to do
and
something,
vibrating with, resonating with,
are trusting that we're going to do
feelings
it well.
of not only other people, but
And it's up to
I've
us. And
become much more
sometimes
aware of,
there are reasons
for
why
instance,
we
why
don't feel
our
like we can
dogs
do it
act
well. Like if
like
we
they
don't
do.
feel well,
more aware that,
right?
hey, we have feelings that are very
And
similar.
Then we
And
need
so,
to
like
be
rather than, and I've discovered
trustworthy,
that
which
when
is
they're
the
doing
adjective
something
for
that I
people
don't
we can
like,
trust. They're trustworthy.
if I
And
call
we
them
need to
over and
be
love them,
trustworthy. And
they
if
stop
we are
doing
not
it.
able
And there's no longer a
to do
conflict.
what people are
And people
trusting us
kind
to
of
do,
react that way too.
we need to say,
And
you know what?
later,
I
he
think
gives
I
us a story
should
of
not
that
do that
happening,
today.
of
Because
an auto accident.
whatever. I'm really
where-
upset and I can't stay
And
concentrated.
I don't think I ever in
because
a million years would have
my
thought to do
parent
this.
just
But it
died
made
or
a
whatever.
lot of
People
sense.
understand.
on
that
page 136.
sometimes, even though we're usually really trustworthy, sometimes we can't
Start
perform.
at the top with the willingness. Karen?
The willingness to identify with another
So
for the sake of
it's,
understanding him
It's a
is seen by
bet or a gamble
Or her.
on the part of the
What did I
person
do?
trusting.
Oh,
And
just,
it's a
interposing
it's a
that.
responsibility on the part of the person.
or her. Oh, I
being
got it. I
trusted.
just got it.
It's two ways. And
Okay.
kindness is
The
going
willingness to
both
identify with
ways.
another for the sake of
Can
understanding
anybody
him or
share
her.
a story with us when
It's seen by some
you
as a weakness,
decided
yet it
to
is the
trust
best solution for
someone
everyone.
and they came through?
The moment someone feels understood and realizes that we see the validity in his or her point of view and the legitimacy of his or her demands, he or she changes. How was that?
That's very good. Obviously, if you were the writer, you might write it a little bit differently, but hey.
In this way, we can avoid countless complications. Some time ago, while driving, I abruptly stopped the car to let a child who had suddenly run out cross the street. The driver behind me bumped my car. As we got out of the cars and approached one another, I saw he was on the warpath. Even though he had not uttered a single word, I could feel he was in an emergency mode.
So he was like the violin. He was resonating with the energy of the other person.
Yet there was no damage to either car. So I spoke first. I could have said, I am right. It was true, but useless, if not harmful. Instead, I said, I was going quite fast and stopped suddenly. You did not expect that. Sorry, are you okay? Immediately, the man changed. Every line on his face moved imperceptibly in a fraction of a second. His defenses dropped. Yes, he was okay. I saw surprise in his eyes. His opponent was interested in how he felt. Then I saw relief. No need to fight. Finally, he simply shook my hand and left. What could have become an argument full of rage and fury was resolved in a few seconds.
Now, I find that very interesting. I'm sure that it happened exactly that way because I've seen that dynamic in action. And always when you respond in a tense situation with empathy for the other person and you show that you are concerned about that person and how they feel, they drop their defenses. They feel heard, they feel seen, they appreciate that attentiveness. And it stops behaviors in their tracks. And like I said, I've learned that it works with the dogs too. If they're standing there barking their heads off and I'm like ready to hit them, and usually I holler at them and they bark more. And if instead I make my voice very sweet and I say, hey, Ami, come here. She comes and she wants to, she wags her tail and she loves me and she forgets all about the barking. It works with, I've had it work with people who are really, really angry too. But when I'm the person they're angry with, I don't necessarily think about them. And it happened a couple of days ago. Somebody got mad with me for a situation like the driver. The guy was right to stop for the kid. He didn't want to run over the child. That was what he needed to do. So he was in the right. And it was, it was the same kind of situation where somebody perceived that I had done something that I hadn't. And they got mad at me. And it hasn't resolved yet. But I did realize, I was proud of myself for realizing that, oh, okay, so there's something about their experience in this minute that means that that person needs to get mad and deal with that anger. But it's not my problem. And so I responded essentially by saying, okay, I'm sorry that you feel that way. I'm sorry that I got you angry, although I didn't. But that's the perception. Nobody else can make us feel anything, really, but we think they do. And so, I took a totally non-defensive stand, and I haven't, since then, I haven't let it worry me, which is really unusual. So this whole thing is a learning process. A little bit later, he mentions that, you know what? When countries get together and they're arguing about something, how much empathy do you see in those discussions? Huh? Lisa,
Not much.
well, do you see any?
It depends on if it's talented ambassadors doing the speaking, or if it's the bellicose warriors of the countries that are doing the speaking.
Right. If it's the politicians, forget it about.
Right. So
It doesn't happen. But what would happen? Just think about it. What would happen if, think about, what about, like, I don't know. Personally, I know that the US has a lot of things that we do that other countries can be angry with us for. But I'm more aware in my mind, actually, in my judgmental mind, I'm more aware of other countries. But I don't, you're right, Lisa. If it's somebody who is a really gifted diplomat, who is in diplomacy, is talking with the leader of a country, empathy is one of their great tools for arriving at some agreement. Because that's another thing, when you feel understood, you're much more willing to say, oh, okay, so what do you need? Than if you feel as though you're embattled. You feel as though the other parties are fighting against you, not understanding. Everybody has circumstances. It's universal. Everybody.
I saw a meme this week that was talking, you have to see it from all sides. So if you're a spider who has spent weeks making a web and a fly gets caught in it, you may be elated, you may be looking forward to a great meal, but the fly is in terror and chaos.
Yes.
No kidding.
That is a great image. Image of the fly and the spider. Yes, that could almost be an Aesop's fable.
Yeah, it's
That's
like
true.
they're not going to see eye to eye in this situation.
No, they're not. And there's a couple of Aesop's fables actually talk about that.
Oh.
In, whether prey and predator can ever see eye to eye, can ever be one in their awareness. So, any questions or any stories or anything you want to add at this point about empathy? Anybody? That's what we're talking about, Tasmia, is empathy.
When you're with a child and a child is upset, there is a technique where you match your breathing to their breathing and it calms them down. And I link empathy to that kind of thing. You have to match the ability to, and then bring it down.
Right,
So that the resonance
right.
becomes less jagged frequency.
Mhm. Yes. And that's a good observation, that breathing with
Mhm.
will create resonance that's harmonic. Just that physical act.
Right. When I worked at the preschool, I could get the babies to lie down and take their naps. And the other teachers said, we lay there, we rub them on the back. All you do is sit there and hold them and then they fall asleep. And I explained to them, I was matching their body rhythms.
Uh-huh.
So as I started breathing, high because they're upset, they don't want to take a nap. And then once I matched it, I could slow my breathing down and theirs matched mine, and then they would calm down and go to sleep.
Wow.
It's a talent, but it's not something that everybody
Well, it's
has
something
to work hard to learn. It's easy
Yeah.
to learn.
Right. You have to know that, oh, I can learn this.
Yes. It's not a magic trick or anything. It's just
What? Magic.
being in the
Magic.
body,
Right. Magic actually is breathing with the laws of what works in different dimensions of awareness. And in doing that, we remove awareness of certain things. That's what magic is. It's the art of empathy carried to extremes.
Yeah. And the teachers were like, okay, he won't settle down at all. Can you take him in this other room? And sure.
Yeah, you got the hard job.
So, I mean, to me, it was a gift to go from that poor, stressful child to a sleeping baby. It's wonderful.
Yes. Right.
So, I didn't mind doing that at all. So everybody else thought, oh, this is a horrible job. I wouldn't want to do it. And I was like, I love doing that.
Yeah, because when you harmonize with someone else, you get the benefits of the harmony too.
Yeah, it's just a calm, just
right.
Everything levels out and is balanced like it's supposed to be, and then we can all relax and sleep. So
yes, and you get to relax and feel peaceful. Yeah, that's the way it goes.
So I mean, that's what this empathy chapter reminded me of, was that yes. I am matching their level to bring them where they need to be, not to force them, but to allow them.
Yeah. To let them know that they are seen, that they are felt, that they matter.
Yep.
And that's what everybody needs. so much so that we respond when anybody is empathetic with us. It's a very powerful experience.
So I spent about 10 years unlearning my natural ability to be empathetic, based on my mother's impression of that being a naivete and poor quality for life. And then I found out I'm not a third of the person without that. I want my 2/3 back. So
Right. And I'm glad you did.
yeah, that was quite enlightening to me to find out that this is something I was born with, that I
Mhm.
spent the first 10 years of my life doing naturally, and then the next 10 years pushing down because it was not something that my parents thought was going to serve me well in life.
Right.
And perhaps it wasn't, but it was mine. So
Mhm.
I took it back.
Yes. Abu, would you like to share with us what your experience with empathy has been? Hey, Abu, are you awake?
Yeah, Boo is frozen or gone.
Right. Oh, well. Okay, so then Ferrucci makes the very, 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 very important point that too much empathy, like too much anything, is destructive of us. In other words, there are people that give themselves over to such an extent to empathy that it becomes harmful for them because they aren't respecting their own needs. And I don't know, I've also, I think that learning empathy is partly a balancing act.
True.
It's a really good thing in moderation when it is coming from a solid awareness in us of who we are, what we need, and loving ourselves enough that we know we need to protect ourselves. So actually, and I have been in situations where I have taken in pain from other people, not really realizing it wasn't my pain. So yeah, that's a learning process too. It's like, okay, I can't do that. I can't let myself do that because it's not my pain. I got enough of my own, thank you. But that's a learning process too. So it's really interesting how complex it is to get it right, to remember to be open around us and to set a boundary that, okay, I can't let it go beyond here, and to know when it is going beyond and say, I find that the times when I have been too sensitive, too open to other people's distress tend to be times when they tend to be meditation sessions and prayer sessions and retreats where I get very open and I'm not thinking about protecting myself, boom, that's when it happens. And that's been painful learning that, okay, in this kind of situation, I still have to know boundaries.
Right. I was in my late 20s and had a church friend who died of cancer. And I knew that the memorial service was going to be just distressing. So I sort of built a wall around myself to keep from feeling what everybody in that room was going to be feeling. And I found that the fact that I had built that wall actually crushed me harder than if I had just let the feelings come through and go. And I think that was the beginning of my realization that protecting myself has to include the ability to let things come through, but not stay.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I was taught by somebody in those retreat situations to wrap myself in the color purple as a protection. But yeah, that's the problem with doing that, is nothing comes through.
Right.
And so finally what I realized was, okay, if I put myself in a frame of mind, in a vibration of just loving, actively loving everybody, that's more powerful than the pain.
Right.
And
then
it's-
it can just
Yeah.
flow as it needs to flow. It doesn't stop.
that's right.
It doesn't gather within you. It
Mhm.
continues on its flow.
Right, yep. So that is a better response
Mhm.
to the need to protect ourselves. And that's that kind of stuff we don't teach. The stuff you have to discover for yourself.
My favorite part of this was on page 138, where the true test of empathy is joy at other people's success.
Right.
Because that's always been part of me.
Mhm.
Is I am very, very happy for other people's success. Their happiness increases my happiness.
Right.
So
And that's really, really a wonderful frame of mind to be in. And actually, a lot of people find that challenging to really just be happy when other people are happy. Because our judging mind goes, gee, I want that. We get jealous. And we just have to know, okay, that's fine, because I can be happy too. I can succeed too.
I think that's where being a catalyst comes in, where you can be the means by which joy happens for another without feeling like it diminishes you for them to have any joy.
Exactly.
Like it doesn't take joy from me for them to
Precisely.
be joyful.
Right. And the same thing is true with other people's anger. It doesn't take away from us. But that's,
You also have to let that go.
Yeah. Abu, you got a question, right?
Yes, I want to participate. I think empathy is something which is very important and we all should learn, because it really help us to communicate with others, to communicate our ideas in a way that makes sense to others.
Mhm.
And it helps us to understand others when they communicate with us.
That's
It
right.
is one of the foundational building blocks of great social interaction and quite obviously powerful stuff.
That's
We
correct.
all should learn it, yes.
Yes. Yep. So the part about pain and how we each deal with pain is also a relevant subject in the context of empathy. Because the other person isn't always successful and happy. You know, how can we be empathetic with someone who is suffering without taking their pain into ourselves? Some people, the way people, different ways people deal with pain are interesting also. Some people get competitive about it. If you've got pain, theirs is worse, and they make sure you know it. Some people actually take their pain as who they are, their justification for being. Sometimes people just feel so sorry for themselves that it's awful. And we all know that, yeah, we're going to have pain. Pain happens on all levels. It's part of being a physically aware being. But we don't need to stay locked in that awareness. And if we can, really empathize, vibrate, resonate with people in suffering, and just let them know we see that they're suffering without letting it affect us, without taking it into ourselves. It's a positive response to people's suffering. And they have to discover for themselves how to shift their awareness, because the way out of pain is to think of something better.
There's a tiny little book by Henri Nouwen called The Wounded Healer.
Yes.
Which is all about that. And it's a wonderful book. It's a beautiful little almost meditation on what it means to be wounded and a healer. And how you can balance the two, and that in fact you must be wounded in order to be an effective healer. So I love this book.
Thank you for sharing that information.
You're welcome.
It should be widely available. It's
quite old.
It's 50, 60 years old. So if you want to get it, you should probably be able to find it cheaply.
Yeah. And Ken says we're even at a library, as the librarian sitting over here next to me.
And Ken is right. Now, I don't know in other countries about, books in libraries, how much, whether there are public libraries.
Yes.
Is there such a thing where you are, Abu?
Yes, we have that in Senegal.
Oh, wonderful. Then,
Yes.
if you're interested in a book like that, they might have it. And I'm sure now when the author is Belgian, so I expect it's
Well, it will be in French, yes.
Yes.
It was originally in French.
Right. So having a healthy relationship with suffering, ours and anybody else's, is a crucial ability to allow us to empathize with someone else's pain without taking it in and as if it were our own. It took me a while to learn about what was my pain and what was somebody else's pain. And I was fortunate to have a couple of friends who were able to ask me that question. Do you know the cause of this pain? Is it really yours? Wow, what a question. I'd never thought of that before. And I wasn't young when I learned that. I was in my 60s probably. But it was a very good question. And I really appreciate the friend who helped me to begin to realize, oh, I can feel pain that isn't mine. I don't need to do that. So we know there are many, many ineffective ways of dealing with pain, running away from it, denying it, making believe it's just not there. Fighting constantly, getting embroiled in it. These are all ineffective ways of suffering. Suffering isn't, if we think of suffering as pain we take on willingly, that's what Buddhism is all about. That's samsara. We don't need to suffer because there are always ways to shift our attention out of the pain dimension and into love, into joy, into beauty. There are many, many ways to do that. And that's what we need to do. Okay, let's read on page 142. Starting with naturally. Karen or Abu, would you like? No, you don't have the book. Never mind.
No, I don't.
Yeah, right. And it's not one that we can get as a PDF. So, unfortunately. Okay, naturally, Karen.
Naturally, our empathy is greatest toward those whose suffering is similar to ours. Someone who is a child will be able to understand the same kind of trauma. The victim,
Abu, if you could mute yourself, it would help everybody. Thank you. Go ahead.
the victim of a car accident, of sexual abuse, or someone who has been bankrupt or who has lost a child can better understand others in similar tragedies and can better help them. Not surprisingly, the area of trauma becomes the area of service.
Let's think about that for a minute. That's interesting, isn't it? That our deepest traumas are where we can be most helpful to other people.
That's why support groups are so prevalent in American society.
Right.
A support group is a group that people who have had similar traumas come together to discuss how they're getting along and what things have helped them and share
Right.
with the others, resources that they have found.
That's right.
And it's very important. It's important work both for healing yourself and for helping others to heal.
That's correct. And I kind of think until we are willing to put ourselves into helping others to heal, it's harder for us to heal.
Mhm.
That in fact, what we give to somebody else, with awareness, comes back and heals us.
Right. I have another story about my mother for that one.
Okay.
My mother had something called familial essential tremor, which I have and my children all have. And she went to a support group in her area in Florida. And she says all those old ladies just were sitting around complaining. So I didn't really like it because I'm not disabled, so I'm not going to go anymore. So because she wasn't willing to open up and hear what they were actually saying, not the words that were coming out of their mouths, she didn't get anything out of it. And that made me slightly sad because she lost out on a lot of things that she could have had to help her.
Right.
Others' experience with assistive devices, for example, she could have known which ones would work better for her and which ones would not.
Right.
But you have to put yourself out there. You can't just say, well, I'm not one of those people. And
Yeah, right. That's the opposite of empathy, I think. I'm
Yeah.
not one of those. Yeah.
Yeah. So, her doctor had sent her to this group and she came home saying, oh no, that is not for me. I'm not going to tell them how I'm feeling or how many things I dropped in a day or how many things of mine I've broken. I'm not telling them. That's none of their business. So she was very insular, which means compact within herself.
That's right.
About that.
Yep. And that is a possible way of dealing with it, but it's not a happy one. It's one that,
no, it did not help her find out what she needed to do for herself at all.
exactly. Yep. Yeah. So one thing that it's important, I think, for adults to know is that kids are, they are empathetic. Human beings are empathetic. And kids perceive other people's pain and resonate with it very strongly. And to be helpful with a kid, it's important to support them and also to resonate with them and show them, demonstrate how to get out of the painfulness of that resonance, which is what you were doing, Lisa, with the kids.
With the little,
Yeah,
the toddlers and the babies.
right.
Yeah.
Because apparently we kind of know this if we've ever visited a nursery, but when kid cries, they all cry.
That's why you have to take the one that's upset out of the situation,
Yeah,
which was my job as the floater
Right.
to
right.
do
But
that.
that's the kids with their natural empathy.
And it almost always worked. Occasionally there would be a child that nothing worked, but that was only temporary. So like that day it didn't work, but another day it would work. So you have to be patient on those occasions where there's something else going on that you have not figured it out yet.
Right.
And
we can also know without any doubt that when a person is defensive or gets angry for seemingly no reason or is suspicious, that they're acting from pain.
right. And there is a reason, even if they don't know what it is.
That's right.
There is a reason, and you just got to accept each person where they start.
That's right. And so, when somebody seems to be impossible, at least we can empathetically know that they are suffering. They're in pain of some kind. And, you know, send them love. Even if they,
Even if they seem to reject it.
yeah, and even
Yes,
if they
very
are
important.
really making us angry and upset, they're not.
Yeah.
They're not doing that because that's who they are. They're doing that out of pain. Because naturally, all of us are able, naturally, to resonate with everything, like the wood.
Right, because it was selected and cut and shaped and framed in a manner so that it would pick up the vibrations around it.
Right. Yep. And that's how we're made as human beings. We all are, everybody. So, I don't know, it struck me as a really well presented concept of empathy and its importance, and some of the important things that we need to know about it in becoming more empathetic. So I enjoyed this discussion. I thank you very much for participating.